Imagine this scenario. You're sitting on your couch, maybe watching TV, and you decide to get up to grab a glass of water. It's a simple movement. You've done it a million times. But this time, as you stand, the floor feels like it drops out from under you. Your vision goes spotty, like an old television, losing signal. Your hands start to shake, not just a little tremble, but a deep internal vibration. You break out into a cold sweat. And in that moment, your brain is screaming one question: what is happening?
Right. Because that sensation, that sudden washing out feeling, could be three completely different biological failures happening at once, or just one of them masquerading as the others. Today, we are deep diving into an article from My Adrenal Life titled Why Low Cortisol, Low Blood Pressure, and Low Blood Sugar Can Feel So Similar.
It's a fascinating and honestly quite terrifying look at how the body's warning systems can sometimes confuse us. We're going to explore why a drop in cortisol, a drop in blood pressure, and a drop in blood sugar all trigger the exact same alarm bells, and why untangling them is a matter of survival for patients with Addison's disease or secondary adrenal insufficiency.
It really highlights how interconnected our systems are. I think most of us hear cortisol and we just think stress hormone. We think of it as the bad guy, right? The thing that gives us belly fat or keeps us awake at night. But this article paints a picture of cortisol as something much more foundational. It's not just about stress, it's about stability.
Absolutely. That is the biggest misconception. In the wellness world, we're constantly told to lower our cortisol. But for people with adrenal insufficiency, cortisol is literally the fuel in the tank. Without it, the car doesn't just drive slowly, it stops. And what this article does so well is explain that cortisol isn't working in isolation. It's a permissive hormone.
Permissive. Break that down for us. That sounds like it's giving permission for something else to happen.
That is exactly it. Think of your blood vessels. They need to squeeze and relax to move blood around, right? To do that, they rely on adrenaline, epinephrine. But here's the catch. Adrenaline cannot do its job unless cortisol is present. Cortisol effectively unlocks the door, so adrenaline can come in and tighten those blood vessels. If you have low cortisol, you can have all the adrenaline in the world flooding your system, but the blood vessels won't respond. They stay dilated. Your blood pressure tanks. And that is why low cortisol can look exactly like low blood pressure, because functionally, it causes it.
That's a great analogy. So cortisol is like the key in the ignition. You can stomp on the gas pedal, the adrenaline, all you want, but if the key isn't turned, the engine, the blood pressure response, doesn't rev up.
Precisely. And that brings us to the first major source of confusion the article highlights: orthostatic hypotension. This is the medical term for that dizziness when standing up. The National Institute of Diabetes and Digestive and Kidney Diseases explains that in adrenal insufficiency, this happens because the fluid volume in the body is low or the vessels aren't clamping down. So a patient stands up, gravity pulls the blood into their legs, and because they lack that cortisol key, the body can't shove the blood back up to the brain fast enough.
And the symptom is dizziness, seeing stars, maybe fainting. But here's where it gets tricky and where the article really draws a sharp distinction. This feeling of weakness and shakiness, it feels almost identical to hypoglycemia or low blood sugar. Why is that?
This is the second piece of the puzzle. Cortisol is also a glucoregulatory hormone. When you haven't eaten for a while, your liver is supposed to release stored sugar, glycogen, into your bloodstream to keep you going. Cortisol is the signal that tells the liver, hey, open the pantry, we need energy. If you don't have cortisol, that signal never gets sent. Your blood sugar drops.
So you have a mechanism for low blood pressure and a mechanism for low blood sugar, both caused by the same missing hormone. But why do they feel the same? Why can't a patient say, oh, I'm shaking, so it's sugar, versus I'm dizzy, so it's pressure?
Because of the body's emergency response system. This is the crucial insight from the My Adrenal Life piece. When your blood sugar drops, what does your body do? It panics. It releases adrenaline and norepinephrine to try to force the body to wake up. When your blood pressure drops, same thing. It releases adrenaline to try to squeeze the vessels. When your cortisol is low, the brain screams for adrenaline. So the symptoms the patient feels, the shaking, the sweating, the anxiety, the heart palpitations, those aren't the symptoms of the low sugar or the low pressure directly. Those are the symptoms of the adrenaline surge.
That is wild. So the feeling is actually the body's fire alarm going off. And the fire alarm sounds exactly the same, regardless of whether the fire is in the kitchen, blood sugar, or the basement, blood pressure.
Exactly. And imagine how terrifying that is. You are standing in your kitchen, you feel that adrenaline rush, that washout feeling the article describes, and you have seconds to decide, do I need to eat sugar? Do I need to drink salt water? Or do I need to take emergency hydrocortisone? If you treat the wrong one, you might not fix the problem.
And the article makes a point to distinguish between the types of adrenal insufficiency here, because that actually changes the equation, doesn't it? We have primary AI, also known as Addison's disease, and then secondary AI. How does that distinction play into these symptoms?
It's a massive difference, and it comes down to salt. In primary adrenal insufficiency, the adrenal glands themselves are destroyed, usually by an autoimmune attack. This means they can't make cortisol, but they also can't make another hormone called aldosterone. Aldosterone is the salt keeper. It tells your kidneys to hold on to sodium. Without it, you pee out all your salt, and water follows it. You become chronically dehydrated.
So the plumbing is literally empty, low volume.
Right. So for an Addison patient, that dizziness is often a volume issue. They are hypovolemic. But in secondary AI, the problem isn't the adrenal gland, it's the pituitary gland in the brain. The pituitary isn't sending the signal, ACTH, to make cortisol. However, and this is key, the signal to make aldosterone comes from the kidneys, not the pituitary. So secondary patients usually have normal aldosterone. They aren't losing salt.
I see. So if a secondary patient feels dizzy and shaky, it's less likely to be dehydration and more likely to be the blood sugar issue or the vascular tone issue we talked about earlier.
Generally, yes, although the article notes that overlap still exists. But the salt craving is a classic hallmark of primary AI that secondary patients don't usually have. It complicates the diagnosis in the daily management. A primary patient might fix their dizziness with a handful of pretzels and water. A secondary patient might eat those pretzels and see no change because their issue is that their blood vessels are just too relaxed due to low cortisol.
I want to touch on something the article mentioned that I think is becoming more common. Iatrogenic adrenal insufficiency. This is caused by medical treatment, right? Steroids?
Yes, and it's arguably the most common form, though often under-discussed. If someone takes high-dose prednisone for asthma or rheumatoid arthritis, or even long-term use of high-potency steroid inhalers, their brain detects all that synthetic cortisol and says, okay, we have plenty. I can stop making my own. The pituitary goes on vacation. The adrenal glands effectively go to sleep and atrophy.
And then if they stop the medication suddenly,
The crash. The brain doesn't wake up fast enough. The adrenals are shriveled and can't respond. And suddenly, that patient is in the exact same boat as the Addison's patient. Low pressure, low sugar, confusion. The article points out that caregivers often notice this first. The person becomes pale, unsteady, or drained. That word drained comes up a lot in patient accounts. It's not just tired, it's like someone pulled the plug on the bathtub.
Let's go back to the sugar issue for a second. The article mentions that hypoglycemia is more common in children with AI. Why is that?
It's a matter of reserves. Adults have larger glycogen stores in their liver and muscles. We can fast for a while before we crash. Children have much smaller tanks. So if you take away the cortisol, which is the hormone that unlocks those tanks, a child will hit empty much faster. But even in adults, the Cleveland Clinic notes that cortisol deficiency makes you incredibly sensitive to insulin. So even normal amounts of insulin can drive your blood sugar too low if cortisol isn't there to counterbalance it.
It's like driving a car where the brakes, insulin, work too well and the gas pedal, cortisol, is broken.
That's a perfect way to put it. And remember, the brain runs almost exclusively on glucose. So when that drops, you get the confusion, the brain fog, the irritability. We've all been hangry, but for an AI patient, that hangry sensation is a prelude to a seizure or a coma if not treated. It's not just a mood swing.
This brings up the practical side of living with this, which the article touches on beautifully. It describes the gradual process of learning your body's signals. It sounds almost like learning a new language. You have to learn that this specific type of shake means I need sugar, but that specific type of heaviness means I need my medication.
It really is a language, and it's subjective. I was reading some patient forums to prepare for this, and people describe it in very visceral terms. One person said, low sugar feels like buzzing bees under the skin, while low cortisol feels like gravity has doubled. Another described low BP as the world tilting. But scientifically, the overlap is so strong that even seasoned endocrinologists tell patients, if you're unsure, treat for all of them. Check your sugar, take some electrolytes, and if you're crashing, take your hydrocortisone. You don't have time to be a purist.
That uncertainty must be incredibly heavy to carry. You're essentially piloting a plane where the gauges are sometimes giving you false readings.
And the stakes are an adrenal crisis. That's the terminus of all these symptoms if they aren't caught. The blood pressure drops so low that organs stop getting oxygen. The blood sugar drops so low, the brain shuts down. It is a life-threatening emergency. That's why this My Adrenal Life article is so important. It validates that confusion. It tells patients you aren't crazy for not knowing which one it is. They biologically mimic each other.
I want to drill down on the washed out feeling. The text uses that phrase multiple times. Is there a physiological basis for that specific sensation? It feels distinct from just dizziness.
It likely relates to systemic perfusion, basically how well blood is permeating your tissues. When cortisol is low, you lose that vascular tone we talked about. Your blood vessels are floppy. So even if your pressure isn't technically fainting level, your microcirculation is poor. Your muscles aren't getting quite enough oxygen. Your brain is getting just a little less flow. It creates this profound, heavy fatigue. It's not sleepiness, it's cellular exhaustion.
And that ties back to the aldosterone issue in primary AI too, right? If you're dehydrated, your blood is thicker, harder to pump.
Exactly. You're trying to pump sludge through a floppy hose. It's a recipe for feeling absolutely terrible.
So if you're a listener who has someone in their life with this condition, or maybe you're newly diagnosed, what is the takeaway here? How do you navigate the fog?
The first step is data. The article suggests that patients eventually learn their patterns, but that takes time. Using tools like a blood pressure cuff and a glucometer at home is essential. Don't guess. If you feel weird, put on the cuff. If your pressure is normal but you feel shaky, check your sugar. If both are normal, it might be the cortisol itself causing that battery drain feeling. You have to become a scientist of your own physiology.
And I suppose the other takeaway is patience. The text mentions that questions about symptoms are reasonable. It seems like the medical community validates that this is hard.
They do. The Endocrine Society's guidelines emphasize education for this very reason. You can't just give a patient a pill bottle and say, good luck. They need to know that standing up too fast on a hot day might require a different response than missing a meal. They need to know that emotional stress, which also burns through cortisol, can trigger these physical symptoms. It's a holistic management strategy.
It's a powerful reminder of how much work our bodies do in the background that we take for granted. We stand up, we eat, we get stressed, and our internal thermostat handles it. For these patients, the thermostat is broken and they have to adjust the dial manually every single day.
Manually and often blindly. But the more they understand these mechanisms, the permissive role of cortisol, the glucose connection, the vascular tone, the less scary it becomes. Knowledge turns that panic into a plan.
Well, this has been an eye-opening look into a complex condition. The article from My Adrenal Life really serves as a roadmap for untangling these overlapping signals. It's not just sugar, it's not just pressure, it's the master switch, cortisol, affecting it all.
It certainly is, and hopefully for anyone listening who experiences this, it provides a little bit of clarity in those foggy moments.
If you found this deep dive helpful, or if you know someone navigating life with adrenal insufficiency who could use this breakdown, please pass this episode along. Helping someone understand why their body feels the way it does is one of the best gifts you can give.